Dear Father, please, my heart is aching. Took a lot out of me to run from Satan. Everything got sold, everything got taken. But this life I know, this life I know it. This life I know, this life I know it. You better watch your soul, keep one eye open. They say I'm chosen, they say I'm chosen. Boy, you better watch me close, my water frozen.
Alright, hi everyone. Welcome to the fourth installment of your favorite podcast, For the Love of God. Today, you're in for a very exciting show. I'm your host, Sarah, and with me, we have Taya. Hi, Taya.
Hello.
Hi. So how are you? What's been going on with you?
I'm doing well, thank you. Mainly just school work, just keeping busy.
Right.
Even throughout the summer, but trying to enjoy myself at the same time.
Right,
How are
on
you
the
doing?
grind. I love that.
How are you?
I'm doing pretty well. I'm trying to be on the grind as well this summer, as far as getting money, being financially stable, at least as much as you can be as at 21.
Yeah.
So, could you introduce yourself a little bit for our audience? Kind of, where are you from?
Yeah, so I'm Taya, like she said. I'm from Toronto, Canada. I don't really know how much detail you guys want, but I'm a student and I work. That's pretty much what I do.
Cool. Okay, good. Well, we're going to get into a little bit more about you a little later on in the show. But first, we have our first segment of today's show called Under the Bushel. And this is where I try and put you guys onto something that I'm really interested in hopes that, you guys will like it too. Okay, so my Let's Put You On this week is Ozark. It's a show on Netflix, and it's about a guy named Marty Bird, who's a financial planner who relocates his family from Chicago to Ozarks, and he gets involved in a lot of like Mexican drug cartel. There's a bunch of violence and family drama and just a whole arc of like character development. And it's so interesting to me because I love all that drama and violence. Have you heard of it, Taya?
I have heard of it a lot of times from a lot of people.
Yeah. Have you seen it, or is it just like word to mouth at this point?
I have seen it. I watched the first 3 episodes maybe. And I hate to start off this way, but I was not a fan.
You weren't a fan?
Like the way you describe it and the way everyone describes it, it sounds so interesting, so amazing, but I just kind of found it maybe a little slow for me.
A little slow. I see. I see. Yeah, it is slow. But then when it picks up, Taya, it picks up. It's so amazing. I love it.
Okay, so I might have to give it another try.
Yes, definitely. Let me know what you think.
Okay, just because you said so, I'll try it.
Okay, good. I believe it just finished its 4th season, so you have every episode to binge. It's done.
Okay, cool.
The show is done. So, are you a big fan of crime dramas? Do you have a show out there that you like?
Yeah, I like a wide range of shows, to be honest, but I do love crime dramas as well. My classic go-tos, Law and Order SVU, always there. Yes. Chicago PD. I don't know why I'm drawn to all these cop shows, especially.
Yeah.
I have very interesting feelings about that, but the shows about it are peak. I love them.
They are peak. Criminal Minds is one of my favorite crimes.
Classic.
Right? And it's honestly, I had to stop watching it multiple times because it's just genuinely scared me to death.
It is. When it was coming out, I used to skip any episode that I felt related too much to my life. So if it was college student,
right?
Can't watch. Young girl, Home Alone, can't watch. I could only watch the really crazy ones that have nothing to do with my life at all.
No. Seriously, right? It makes you scared to step out of your home because
literally
you could just.
And then I'm thinking, what would I do if I got kidnapped and I should not be posting where I am on social media?
Right.
It had me really paranoid. Maybe rightly
so paranoid. Yeah. Do you have any other things that you'd like to put our audience on, or something that came up in the past couple of weeks that you're interested in, as far as media, TV, music, books?
I feel like I'm always reading something, watching something, so I do.
Okay.
But of course, nothing exact's going to come to mind. But I will say in general, I love reading books, specifically fiction. I like romance novels. I like just modern fiction. And I, as of the last maybe 2 years, I've really kind of just only been reading Black authors, and I've really enjoyed doing that. I know a lot of people, kind of shy away from reading and don't really like it that much, but that's just something that I've been super interested in for the last little bit, and I'm always looking at new things coming out. So I just recommend people to pick that up again, and they might find that they like it. If anyone wants any recommendations, I don't know, put a comment or something, and I would definitely get back to you on that. So that would be kind of my suggestion.
Cool. I believe we were talking before this about a book that you're recently getting into. Do you know the title of it? Do you remember?
Yeah, the one I'm reading right now is called One of the Good Ones. Right. The authors are, I believe, a pair of sisters, but I don't call their names. But it's about 3 sisters, like the seemingly happy Black family, and then one sister who's very involved in social activism. This is not a spoiler because it starts this way. Mm-hmm. She ends up dying at a protest. Mm-hmm. And so the book kind of jumps backwards and forwards in time, showing how her friends and family dealt with that, as well as like what she stood for as an activist. Right. And kind of like the repercussions, I guess, of when someone dies and they get kind of media attention and they're seen as one of the good ones, as opposed to like, someone who had maybe a criminal background or something else, and kind of how those two types of people are portrayed in the media. Right, like the kind of martyrdom that happens sometimes when people pass in the spotlight. Yeah. Okay, well. So I'm about halfway through right now. I really like it. Good. All right. Well, hopefully our viewers out there get to check it out and let you know what you think in the comments. If they haven't, maybe if they've read it already, that'll be really cool to start a discussion about that. All right. Now to our next segment of today's episode. It is called Word, and that's where I kind of summarize the past week's lessons that hopefully we all tuned in for. So on Friday night we had Blessings of the 12 Tribes from the Northeast Branch, which was presented by Elder Kurt and Edward. And this really went through the lineage of Jacob and his 12 sons and the nation that came out of it, and how, up until our enslavement, our identities were through our tribes, and that's how we tracked ourselves. So definitely check that out. Let them know what you think. Let me know what you think. And Saturday lesson, it was so interesting. It was What is the Kingdom of God with Elder Michael and Elder Andel. Okay, so check those out. They're every Friday at 7:30 Eastern and Saturdays at 2 p.m. Eastern. And like I said, they're recorded. You can check them out anywhere you're at, in the bed, while you're going to work, on the way home. And comment, like, subscribe. Let them know what you think. I'm excited for this. This is our game of today's episode. It's called Biblical Matchmaker. Okay? And so this is where I'm going to describe a male from the Bible, and you let me know if you would potentially go on a date with them. Okay. And then also for bonus points, let me know if you could, see which character it is, who it is, based on the description. Okay, you ready? Mm-hmm. So, in door number 1, we have an infamous womanizer who has all women around the world in their heart throbbing. If you pick him, he will be loyal forever, possibly too loyal. Okay? That's door number 1. And in door number 2, we have a man who climbed his way to the tippy top of the most famous monarchy in history through his amazing gift and talents, and is now second in command. And so who would I choose, and if I know who they are, right? Well, even if you don't know who they are, just based on the description and like who you could see yourself with more likely, gotcha. Let me know which one. Easily, door number 2. Door number 2. Yeah, because so for door number 1, when you said maybe too loyal, that kind of triggered the criminal minds discussion we were just having. Right. That's kind of scary. And then for number 2, hardworking, good provider. He can get from anywhere to the top. Right. And that's what we want. I like it. I like that. I think that was my choice as well. What do you know who I'm talking about in both scenarios? So door number 2 that I chose is Joseph. Door number 1, like my first instinct is Solomon. Right. I don't know. Exactly. Yeah. Okay. It's Solomon. Right. He definitely was the infamous womanizer. All right. Number 2. So in door number 1 here, we have an amazing caregiver who would protect you from anything, including handsy Pharaoh, but you have to pretend to be his sister on more than one occasion.
Door number 1. Door number 2 is a man who would have to marry your sister before he can marry you. But eventually he does.
That's a hard one.
Yeah.
I think I'm gonna go with door number 1.
Okay.
Just because, like, ultimate protection, always gonna take care, provide, love that.
Right.
Even if, you have to tell a little lie here or there, he's using his wisdom to make sure we're safe.
Right.
Exactly. Gotta do what you gotta do.
Exactly.
Door number 2, realistic, messy family drama.
Mm-hmm.
So we don't need that.
It's not for you. Not for you. Okay.
No.
Good. All right. And do you know who I'm talking about in these scenarios?
Yes. Door number 2 is Jacob. Door number 1 is Abraham?
Yes.
Okay.
All right. Option number 3. So we have a man who would stay by your side even though you're carrying someone else's baby.
Okay.
Or a man that can win every battle he fights and play the harp so well it can expel any evil spirit coming your way.
Number 2.
Number 2? Why?
Yeah, because for number 1, again, messy drama. Even though he's staying beside me, and I love that and appreciate that.
Yeah.
Could get complicated.
Yeah.
Number 2, I didn't hear a downside. I didn't hear any problems.
You're right about that.
Joseph and David, right?
Yes, it was.
Okay.
Yes. Okay, good. Well, thanks for playing along with me. That was kind of fun.
No problem. I like that.
Yeah. Well, now we're on to my favorite part of these podcasts, is called What's Poppin'? And this is where we kind of strike up conversations about important topics and what we care about, what's happening in the world. Okay, so the first important topic I want to get to is you, Taya. I mean, kind of tell us more about you. What school do you go to? What do you study? How'd you get into this field? I just want to know what you're interested in.
My favorite topic. So yeah, as I mentioned earlier, I'm a student.
Mm-hmm.
I am finishing up my first year of my PhD in forensic psychology.
Mm-hmm.
I go to Ontario Tech University, which is in Ontario, Canada. I got my bachelor's degree from the University of British Columbia. Mm-hmm. And so I always knew, or at least from high school, I knew I wanted to do psychology. I just didn't really know what aspect or field of psychology I wanted to be in. Mm-hmm. And then so in my second or third year, we had this student come in talking about the fact that my school had like this forensic specialization. And I learned about what that was and took some forensic psych courses and like fell in love with it immediately. So since my second or third year then, I focus specifically on forensic psychology. And just for anyone that doesn't know, forensic psych is pretty much the intersection of psychology and the law. So it's very broad as well, but it could be involved in things like policing, interrogations, expert witnesses, fitness to stand trial, like any aspect of the criminal justice system that you can think of. There's more than likely a way you can apply psychology to it. To understand suspects, understand victims, understand the process and how it affects people that interact with it, things like that. So like I said, I'm in my PhD right now. I recently finished my master's, also in forensic psychology, at the same school I'm at now. That was a 2-year program where I did research looking at wrongful convictions, and that's still what I look at now. Mm-hmm. And then just again, background, a wrongful conviction is when someone is convicted of something they didn't do, and that's later discovered. So I did my research, my master's research on that, and I'm currently developing my dissertation topics and studies that will look at that as well.
Wow, that's very impressive, honestly.
That's a lot of words.
It is, and it just, congratulations, first of all, for completing your master's. That's impressive. I know I've never even heard of that type of field. I know I've heard about psychology, but for it to be so like specific and something that matters a lot, especially when we talk about criminal justice and social justice, very popular topic these days.
Yeah, I hadn't heard about it at all either until the point I did, as I mentioned. Right. I think especially in Canada, it's not as like well known or popular. I think it's getting more popular now, at least in terms of more and more people becoming familiar with it. So I think that's pretty cool.
Cool. What are some challenges you see as a Jacobite in this field that you're in?
I mean, I'm sure people can relate in a lot of different types of fields, but I would say firstly just being one of the only, right? Like predominantly white institution, as you know, they're called online, not seeing other people that look like you, whether that be the students you're in class with, the faculty you work with, and that can be really difficult. Like I went to a conference just a couple months ago, and I think especially a topic like this, where you're talking about the criminal justice system, and the conference I went to was in the States, where of course there's like these really huge racial disparities when it comes to Black people. And then these spaces, these conferences are predominantly white again, and it's difficult to kind of spend the whole day hearing about racial inequality in the criminal justice system in a room full of other white people and not a lot of people that look like you. It can be draining, and it can kind of feel, I guess, just alienating, like, you know, like you're the only one. And of course, I'm not the only one. I'm not saying that. There are many others, but you can definitely see the difference in terms of numbers, and that can be kind of disheartening at times.
Right. I think you're right about that. It's that type of feeling is relatable as being a Israelite in the world these days, where we're in the room. Like I feel like for the longest time that was the goal for us, is to be in the room. But now that we're in the room, we're looking around and we're the only one in the room. It's like
and then, you know, I'm trying to like do my part, I guess, and make sure that I bring up that perspective for people that might not consider it or might not live it.
Right.
But it, like, even that just gets tiring, having to like be that voice. And it's crazy because that's things that, you know, people have spoken about for years. Like I think Frantz Fanon talked about like having to represent your race when you're a Black person to other white people. Like, so this is not anything new. It's just, you know, kind of, I guess, a different aspect of it.
Right.
I remember I was in a class on social relationships, so friendships, romantic relationships, things like that. And some researchers had pretty much come up with categorizations of what marriages were centered around in like different time periods. And one of the time periods was like literally in the middle of slavery. And they're saying these things as if they're facts, like, again, like you said. And I'm like, well, my people were literally slaves.
Right.
So this does not reflect everyone's experience at that time. Like, and they're saying it like it does.
Right.
Frustrating.
It is really, really frustrating and exhausting. And I feel like it's about time people did their own work as far as researching what's okay to like the analytical lens to research things and talk about things. I think it's about time people kind of step up.
And I've had a professor who was really good at that and like making sure they brought up those issues again, especially because I'm in a criminal justice related field. Like that's so relevant to the whole field. And so when you have a professor, you have a supervisor who really does care about those things and make an effort to highlight them and bring them up and make sure we're talking about them, it's really refreshing. So more people definitely need to get on that.
Yeah. Okay. Speaking of criminal justice in America, there was a recent shooting in Buffalo, New York, just outside a supermarket, where a white man who was motivated by racist and extreme beliefs opened fire on a predominantly Black supermarket. And he ended up killing 10 people and wounding 3. Have you heard about this?
Yes, I definitely have.
Right. I'm not going to mention the man's name, just to not give him that satisfaction, but it was definitely heartbreaking to hear about this and to hear that, like, it wasn't just an attack, but he planned it over the course of months. He talks about it on a social platform, had people like go over his plans and comment on it, and there was a quote in this article I read saying that he considered attacking a church or an elementary school before settling on a supermarket. So there's this huge like amount of thought process and planning that came into this decision to hurt and kill these people. And he even checked out the supermarket beforehand, right? And he sent plans on social media. He was very intentional about this. And I know that we've seen cases like this in Tried, where there's a white man who's, mass shooting. And it usually involves, at least what I've seen, a shooter pleading not guilty for reason of insanity. But it's clear here that the recent shooter, like all this planning, he was very clear-headed in this decision to carry out this shooting. What do you think of what happening? What do you kind of think of what happened based on your background in criminal psychology, and especially a habit of these, white men coming out and claiming insanity for what they've done.
Yeah, so just in general, like hearing about that happening and speaking about it with friends and family, like you said, it was shocking and like heartbreaking, literally. And it's really difficult to just know that these, like people, like you said, are literally planning out these attacks. It's literally just heartbreaking is the only word I can think of.
Right.
So it's been difficult hearing about that. In terms of, like, I guess from a more psychological background, there are some differences between Canada and the States, of course, but overall, like you said, like things that might go against that defense, there's the premeditation of it all, the planning of it all, and pretty much whether or not they were aware of like the criminality of what they were doing, whether they're aware that this was a crime and continue to do that anyways. So it's unfortunate. I feel like a lot of people kind of lean on that defense and kind of result in people not understanding what that defense really is when it's used properly.
Right.
And I think it also speaks to the fact that kind of, in my opinion at least, and this isn't necessarily like a psychological hot take, but I feel like, the media, when we talk about how the media characterizes certain suspects, like the book I was talking about, when we see a white suspect do something, as we all have seen online, they have mental health issues, they were going through a hard time, or XYZ, whatever the reasoning, and then you see maybe a black person do it and it's criminal background, mugshots, and then you see a brown person do it and it's terrorism. Like media has these specific narratives that they push for different types of people, and I think it kind of makes it easy for these suspects to then go ahead and say, yeah, I'm going to try and claim insanity. Then that's what the media is already likely to push. So it's kind of like a whole circle of factors, I would say, that kind of lead to it. And it's sad. And hopefully, we can only hope really with the justice system, but hopefully, the people that are prosecuting it collect all the evidence they need. Like you said, a lot of it is easily available, and hopefully kind of we get a fair outcome, a fair sentence. Who's to determine fair is a whole nother conversation, but I don't think it would be fair if he were not to be found guilty. So I'll leave that at that, I guess.
So I think we see in history so many Black people go down for crimes that they did not commit. We see even examples of how the justice system favors white men over Black people, and it's just really disheartening. I know we were talking before and how you studied a lot about wrongful convictions in your field, especially the Central Park Five, or as you put it, the exonerated five. Could you speak a little bit on this and kind of what your study was about on that?
Yeah, so like you said, for my master's thesis, I focused on the case of the Exonerated Five, or Central Park Five. They were a group of 5 young men who were in Central Park one night in, I believe, 1990 or 1989, and were accused and eventually wrongly convicted of the sexual assault of another woman who was in the park. And then years later it was found out, like I said, that they did not commit this crime when the true perpetrator of the crime actually confessed. So that was a very popular case at the time when it happened, very popular again at the time when their case was brought up and exonerated, and then very popular again in 2019 when Netflix released a mini series entitled When They See Us. And so for my thesis, I wanted to look at how a show like that, When They See Us, could impact the conversations that people were having about wrongful convictions. So I wanted to know, was this teaching people about the case? Was it teaching people about wrongful convictions in general? What was it that people were talking about after they watched it? So I don't want to bore anybody, but I did a bunch of analyses of literally like the words that people were using when they spoke about it online, on Reddit specifically, as well as like quantitative analyses, looking at the amount of wrongful conviction posts that were shared before versus after that came out. Again, just to kind of get at the conversations being had. I think I got some interesting results, and I'm trying to get those published now. But it was really interesting to me, not only just for this case alone, but just wrongful convictions in general. And as we're obviously talking about like racial disparities and things like that, that exists in wrongful convictions as well. You see, a disproportionate amount of exonerees, so people who have been wrongly convicted and then released and cleared, being Black people, Black men, much more so than their numbers in the actual population. And that, so there's obviously like a disconnect there. Why are they the ones being more likely to be wrongly convicted based on their numbers in the population? So there's so many different parts of the criminal justice system where you can see racial disparities, and this is just another one of them.
To change gears, something a little more lighthearted. This past week or this past few weeks, Kendrick Lamar came out with his album called Mr. Morale and Big Steppers. I believe it came out on May 13th, and it was his 5th studio album. Have you heard of it? Have you listened to it yet?
Yeah, so it came out on my brother's birthday, actually. So when we were all hanging out together with his family, we listened to a couple of the songs. I didn't get through the whole album yet. I've seen all the hype, though, like on social media, and everyone seems to be like going crazy and loving it. I know he has a tour coming up, so it's definitely exciting, especially in my house. Like I said, my brothers are super excited about it all, so.
Yeah. Are you a fan of his larger work, other work, and his other albums?
I'm not like the biggest fan. I feel like I know the popular songs. I probably don't know a lot more of the, I don't know if underground is the right word, or, those less popular songs I probably don't know. But yeah, I like him.
Good. Okay, cool. In this album, like you said, it's very, very popular right now. He unloads a lot of personal experiences and grievances that he's gone through in the past, especially with his own mental health and growth. And with titles like United in Grief, We Cry Together, and Mr. Morale, I think it's truly an homage to what we are all dealing with today, really your identity and who you are and who you want to represent through the good days and the bad. And he just talks about his growth and really his outlook on life. And I think it's really, really, you definitely need to listen to it more than once. So you can get the vibe, but then you can also get the message as well. I'm especially a fan of the track We Cry Together. It's very, I wouldn't listen to this with my parents per se, but it is such a raw and honest exchange between two people in a relationship that are battling ego and insecurities and a bunch of other stuff. Very, very intense, but it's just a take on that type of situation that I haven't really heard in music that way. Have you listened to that one yet?
No, I haven't heard that one. I definitely have to listen to it now.
Definitely. I liked it a lot. I just played it in my car and turned it all the way up. That's how I listen to music, so I could feel it, and it's really good. So
yeah, I'm definitely gonna have to listen to that. But I'm all for people just showing the not so great side of life as well. Like I feel I'm so used to seeing all the good stuff, social media, celebrities, and all that stuff. So I love that already. Just the fact that it's kind of like a more honest look at life and things that go on in life. Big fan.
Yeah, definitely. And I think this is a good segue to the topic I wanted to hit on today's show, which is mental health, right? And how I feel like it's hidden a lot. But what I can commend this generation of doing is taking that by the bullhorns and trying to conquer it. Maybe it's specific to my feed. Maybe I just search specific things, but I know even on social media, every other video that I see is someone trying to better themselves or have a mantra or telling a story about their own personal mental health or growth trajectory or anything like that. And I get this sense that people are really, really trying to do better and be better internally, right? I think there was this huge arch of fake and image and social media. This is how you're supposed to look and act. And now I see kind of the other end of people really trying to look inside themselves and see, oh, wait, do I even like the person that I'm, presenting and people are commenting on and things like that? Have you seen that type of, are you on social media to see this type of thing? Have you kind of noticed this trend in, I don't even know what generation we are. Are we generation Y? Z? I don't know. And
whatever we are.
Whatever we are. And this generation's kind of idea of what mental health should look like.
Yeah, I am on social media on some of them, and I have seen what you're talking about. I see a lot of people talking about also breaking generational curses and, speaking positively to yourself, your children, your friends, and things like that. I'm definitely seeing exactly what you described, which is really refreshing. Just to let people know they're not alone, a lot of people are going through these same things, or exactly, maybe not exactly, but very similar to what you've gone through. And for some people that's really comforting. It helps them feel less like alienated. And so I love that. And I recently tried to make sure that who and like the different organizations and stuff I was following on social media kind of reflected that. I wanted to make sure I wasn't only following like the glitz and the glamour stuff. I wanted to follow that kind of thing just to kind of keep me reminded and grounded and stuff like that. So I definitely seen what you're talking about on social media, and I'm appreciating it. Like you said, that shift away from everything is perfect. Here's a picture of it.
Right, here's a picture of it, right? Here's proof that here's everything that isn't perfect.
Yeah.
I definitely like, especially growing up, I mean, on top of being a Black person in America, in the world really, on top of growing up just with pressure that parents usually put on kids, families, stuff like that, we are in Israel, which of course it's loving, it's our culture, we love it, but there is a pressure in that role. There is a certain characteristics that the world doesn't share that we kind of have to, put on our shoulders to carry. And I think growing up, there's this huge a time in my life where I had to figure out how to juggle all of that. And for me personally, it took some time.
Yeah, I feel like all of those kind of pressures combined, it created the situation to where when we went out into the world as individuals, it wasn't just we were Black, we were alone, but it was also because we had this specific culture that we were aware of and that we followed and loved, and we couldn't really find anyone to relate to that in the outside world. And it was just became really tough for me personally to really hold my identity and how to juggle all of these pressures that I'm feeling, especially growing up and the pressures that already exist as a middle schooler or a high schooler. And to have that on top of everything was really, I felt mentally exhausted for the most part.
Yeah, I 100% agree with you. I identify so much with what you're saying. I think you said it perfectly. I had the same experience. Like when I left for university, I went from Ontario to British Columbia, which is like going from New Jersey to Washington State. Like it's that distance apart. Mm-hmm. So I was completely alone, very, very far from friends, family, brethren. And like you said, just having to navigate that extra layer of my identity, right? So I had to learn, what is it like? I'm 18. So what is it like for me to be a woman? I'm no longer like a kid. I'm a woman now. Mm-hmm. And then I'm a Black woman in British Columbia. It's not that many Black people around me. And then, like you said, I'm an Israelite. What do all those things mean for me? How do I move being all those things? And, even if you're able to find other women and other Black people, for my experience specifically, there was no other Israelites for me to find there. And I think it's all just a part of learning about who you are, becoming comfortable with who you are. Like I had to navigate what it meant for me to be an Israelite, like on my terms, right. Specifically away from home. Right. I had to get comfortable, like telling my friends, like, no, it's my Sabbath, or no, it's my this, or no, I don't do that. And at first it's terrifying, and you feel like weird, or like, nobody does this thing. Nobody knows what you're talking about. Right. But, eventually I found good friends who were really supportive and understanding, and even like gave me props, like, wow, you're so dedicated. Like, that's amazing. And so, I found people that supported me and what I did, but it was hard as heck. Yeah. My first tabernacles out there alone, I cried the whole day. Like my first tabernacles was a complete disaster. Like it was great, obviously, because I still kept it in God of Israel and all the lovely things, but being alone and having to get this meal by myself in my dorm, and I have no supplies. It was horrible. So I have a lot of like rough stories from figuring it out. Looking back, I can say, it's a part of life. It's part of just becoming your own person and standing in who you are. And so, is a part of the process, and it's kind of like beautiful in that way, but being in it, it's not so beautiful. At the time, it's not so beautiful.
It's tough. There is such a learning curve that kind of no one can relate to. Of course, there's relatable moments and feelings, but this specific learning curve, it's very attuned to us, especially because, like, I feel like And it's almost, it's not even shameful to say, it's more like, it's weird saying that I just came into that realization, into this type of comfortability with myself, just probably the past couple years. It's very new for me. I think for a while I had like confidence issues, self-esteem issues, and kind of, and not even just about Israel, just I guess kind of normal to say, like what the world deals with, kind of just self-image and seeing what the world views as beautiful versus what I look like.
Yeah, it's not weird at all. Like, I think that's kind of the perfect time for it. And obviously, like, we would all love to be super confident 24/7 from birth, but that's, usually not the case. And early 20s, late teens, or even I'm 20, almost 27, and I'm still going through a lot of those things now. It's a lot of, just acceptance of yourself and learning all these different things. And it's difficult. And sometimes you might learn it and get to where you want to be and then backslide and got to do it again. And so it's not weird. I think it's a part of this phase of your life, right? Like, when you're like looking back, you're able to say like, oh, okay, everything happens for a reason. It's a beautiful process, blah, blah, blah. But in the moment, it's not. It doesn't feel so great.
It's so hard, right? Like, I love saying that everything happens for a reason, but you're right. In the moment, it seems like the world is kind of crumbling around these things,
and it feels like no one can relate to you, even though there probably are people that can relate.
Right.
But you feel like no one can relate to you, and that you're in it alone. And
right.
It's all learning experiences. It's all those things that build you up and build your character.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. I definitely agree with that. I think for me, especially, I definitely agree with that. When these past few years, before this kind of comfortability I have in my skin, I would go through this phase of like, I'd call it like a dark hole of negative thoughts, right? To where they kind of cycle and domino effect into this kind of feeling like I wasn't adequate enough to do what I was doing, whether it was like house chores or schoolwork or career choices, to those bigger, choices and things like that. It was very much a cycle of like, I'm good enough for today, but then day 2 or day 3, I'm just like surrounded and kind of drowning in these feelings of inadequacy. And what really helped me is going to therapy. I know it's kind of a taboo subject. I know it's kind of something that not everyone welcomes with open arms, but it really allowed me to kind of have a soundboard to my thoughts and realizing what I was telling myself. And it also allowed me to kind of get direction to where I want to be and create those goals. And on top of that, here are some answers to those questions. Here are some things I hope will work that, ended up did working for me.
Yeah, I'm realizing now that I think we have more in common than I knew. Like, I even now deal with those thoughts of like inadequacy, and I always tell my mom it's like my imposter syndrome. I feel like, what the heck am I doing? Like, I don't know how I got here. What am I doing? I don't know what I'm talking about. People are gonna realize like I have those feelings now too. And I also went to therapy for a year and a half maybe. And just like you said, just having someone to speak to whose job it is to be non-judgmental and whose job it is to help you process your thoughts and help you with coping mechanisms and things like that was really helpful for me also. Like you said, it's taboo in some circles, and some people have negative opinions on therapy and think it doesn't work, a waste of money. Everyone has their own opinions on it, but I can say for me it was also very helpful. I was going through probably the roughest time I've gone through in my life, and so ended up there and definitely appreciated it so much. So I recommend it to anyone who's considering it. I would say try it out. And again, in comments or however this works, if you want to reach out to me with any questions about the process, I'd be more than willing to answer. But I definitely think it's something that was helpful to me, and it sounds like it was helpful to you too.
It definitely was.
Just to be able to kind of just have a better understanding of your own thoughts sometimes.
I think in the beginning for me, I felt very selfish taking this time for myself. I felt like it was hard for me to talk about myself. I was always talking about other people because it felt very, very weird to focus on myself at first. Yeah.
That's really interesting too, and then I guess it got easier over time.
It did. And finding the right therapist as well. Like, don't be afraid to change them. so you could click. Yeah,
100%. And I tell people that have asked me about it, like some therapists will offer like a 15-minute consultation, or you can kind of just see if you vibe, or if there's nothing wrong with trying. You might not like the first person you get, just like in normal life. You might not like your coworkers or something like that. You might not like a therapist, and that would be okay too.
Right.
But once you find a good one, it can be really great.
It can, and it takes time and work. But I'm really, really happy to hear that has helped you, and that you've taken that risk and tried out therapy in your life. What are some actually before that? Where would you say you are now in your process of self-love?
That's a good question. That's a really good question. I've definitely come far, and I think I just get a better understanding of myself as I get older. And more, I think my self-love comes from just accepting who I am. Like I said, social media especially, or like just comparing myself to other people's process, other people's lives is difficult. It makes you feel like you're, I don't know, behind or stuff like that. And so I've just been learning to accept like where I am and the timing of everything going on in my life. Just being comfortable with being like, I don't like that and everyone else does, or I like that and no one else does. Just being, or trying to be at least, just confident in myself and my decisions, and comfortable in what it is that I like and don't like. And then, like we're just talking about, kind of really being honest with myself about how I'm feeling about things and communicating that with people. Back to, again, having those people in your life that really support you, like communicating that with the people around you, like just building a life where you are comfortable and you're comfortable around the people around you. Like that all kind of feeds into my self-love journey. I do think I have a long way to go. I, like I said, deal with those issues of feeling like I'm inadequate or feeling like I am an imposter in where I am. And so I have a lot to grow and learn, but I'm happy where I've come so far, I will say. Good. I've definitely seen my improvements. And so that in itself is refreshing.
Good. I'm happy about that. I'm really happy to hear that reflection is at a positive point in your life. We're talking about tools and kind of how you got to this point, and a part of it was kind of noting what you liked, what you didn't like. And I did not realize how hard that was until I actually tried to sit down and make a physical list of things I liked and didn't like, my standards for certain things. One, I didn't realize how hard it was, and two, I didn't realize I didn't know these things about myself before that point. And that's what created a lot of this blur for me, especially I was so struggled a lot with setting boundaries with my friends and my relationships. And realizing that, hey, I don't know myself was such a big step, was such a huge revelation that I need to figure out how to be me and how to hang out with just me and be content with that.
100%. Like you said, you grow up, so much of our lives are shaped by our friends, our family, church, the nation, everything like that.
Right.
That your identity kind of becomes tied to all of those different things in different ways, which is not a bad thing. It just is what it is. But as you get older, like that identity formation stage of like late adolescence, early adulthood, you do have to say, who am I? Who do I want to be? Do I like who I am? Do I know who I am? Yeah. Those are those questions that like you have to ask, and not to say that it's only kind of restricted to that period in your life, because I know 50, 60-year-olds that are still asking themselves those things. Yeah. But it's definitely important to kind of realize, like, I am someone separate from all of these things. Right. Like, all of these things help make me who I am, but I am still an individual. And who is that individual? Right. That's a part of it all, right? Like, you're going to have good days, bad days. You're going to have good weeks, bad weeks, good months, bad months. It's all part of life. And, like, sometimes it's, like, unfortunate. Like, I don't want to go through these hardships and difficulties, but, it is what it is. And we have to kind of, I think in the good times especially, build up those tools, build up our coping mechanisms, build up our sense of self, build up our spirituality, so that when we do get to those harder times, we have those things to fall back on, to rely on. Right.
Creating those networks already, so that it's like default when it comes
to
those hard times. I totally agree with that. And the idea of self-care and therapists, do you think it matters as an Israelite to have a therapist, and should we be encouraging our brethren to take part in having a therapist?
So again, like we said, there are like, you might not click with every therapist. But from my personal experience of therapy, I would say yes. And then also from my experience of just like, being interested in psychology, I would say yes. And that's because like for my therapist, again, I was going through what I honestly right now would say is probably the hardest time in my life, went to therapy, told her about myself, my background, pretty early on. And then I remember months later speaking to her and she's like, well, you told me you're a spiritual person. When was the last time you prayed? And I was like, okay. But like if you find a therapist that you're comfortable with and you feel like understands you well enough, like it doesn't. So I know some people feel like therapy is separate from your spirituality, right? And why go to therapy when I can pray,
right?
But I literally had my therapist tell me to go pray,
right?
And that's not an Israelite, right? Like,
right.
But they knew it was important to me. And so again, if you're able to just share about who you are in any circumstance, including a therapy circumstance, they should be able to help you as best as possible. That's what their training is there for. So I think it can be really beneficial for an Israelite once you find a therapist you mesh with. Again, just to have a separate sounding board, someone to hear you out and to kind of reflect what you're saying onto you. And it can really, like you said, help ground you, help giving you those coping mechanisms. And one of mine for my therapist in my health was go pray,
right.
As well as like connect with my family and those other things that you love doing. So I think there's so much value in it, and I don't see it as being necessarily separate from practicing spirituality. I think they can go hand in hand. So I know I'm a little bit biased, but I think it can be great.
Yeah, definitely. So like, let me know comments in the comments, or call me, talk to me. Hopefully Tay is available for that as well. If you have any questions about it, if you want some advice about how to find the right therapist, even if you're against it, I'm happy to talk about it and see why and see that point of view. And I'm so happy, Taya, to have this conversation with you today and to be able to delve deep into kind of what's going on in our minds and relate on a lot of things as well.
Yeah, I literally second everything Sarah just said. I am definitely available. You guys can contact me in any of the ways you can contact me to talk about it. I would love to. And thank you so much for having me, Sarah. As you know, this is something I love and like is near and dear to me, so I always look for an opportunity to talk about it.
Good.
Happy to see that we relate on a lot of things and have more in common than I knew. And this is a perfect example, right, of when you talk about things out loud, you get to see things that you would have never seen otherwise. So hopefully our conversation is also doing that for other people as well.
I really hope we're connecting to you guys out there. Thank you so much, Taya, for being our guest on today's show. And thank you guys for tuning in and watch. And as I said before, comment, like, subscribe so you can see when our next episode's coming out and who our next guest is and what our next topic is. I'm your host, Sarah. Thanks for joining in today. And have a wonderful week.
Thank you, Sarah. Thanks, everyone.
We got